What's up, guys? Jairo Morales from the Grind Fitness Training Systems. Welcome to our next topic. Today, we're going to talk about energy systems for combat conditioning. What is combat conditioning? The first thing I put on here is what a lot of fighters end up doing. I'm a victim of this as well, especially if you're on the younger side, because this is what happened to me when I was on the younger side, is training hard isn't necessarily training efficient. Because you're not training the right energy systems that transfer over to actual combat sports. So the reason why this is important is because the conditioning that doesn't match your sport, basically if you're working out in a particular way that doesn't match your sport, you're going to basically run out of gas. And there's nothing worse than running out of gas when you're fighting. There's a famous Vince Lombardi quote that says, fatigue makes cowards out of all of us. So basically, and that's football. So in the fighting game, it's an even a higher cost. So, and I'm sure some of you, whoever's watching, you've been there where you're so tired that if it doesn't match your sport and you're running out of gas in an actual fight, it's the worst possible experience you're going to have. It's actually worse than getting knocked out. At least when you're knocked out, you get knocked out and the fight's over. Okay, so what are the energy systems? There's three energy systems that predominantly are used for combat sports. The very first one is ATP-CP. It's very short bursts, so think takedowns, not even striking, think takedowns where you're doing a lot of effort for 1 to 3 seconds. I would say 1 to 10 seconds, to be honest with you. Once you lean towards the 30 seconds, you're doing what's called glycolytic oxidation. So basically you start burning sugar. So your body and your liver hold a certain amount of glycogen in your storage in your body and in your muscle tissue. So it goes through ATP in the short burst. You go a little bit longer, you're now burning out sugar. And then the last one is you also need to train, which is what's called road work. So you see a lot of boxers do that where they're doing like marathons. Nate Diaz, if you want to use that as an example, he was like a triathlon runner and things like that. So that's why his volume game was, at least that particular fighter, he was just a volume guy. He didn't hit hard. He just never got tired. And he would tire out his opponents until like the third or fourth round. And then he would turn it on or clip them because they were basically so tired. And his conditioning, because he could recover between rounds and between short spurts so well that the other person would just get tired. So the goal here is to match or do a balance of all these. You can't only be doing ATP. You can't always be doing glycolytic, and you can't always be doing aerobic. Now, because HIIT training in combat sports is a weapon, because the reason being is that it mostly burns sugar, because this is the number one energy system that you're using when training combat sports. So if it boosts your lactate threshold, what that means is the level of sugar that you're burning at a certain point, that burn, the muscle stops working. So when you're able to elevate that lactate threshold, that effort level and the ability in order for you to burn sugar is higher, because your body's able to process the byproduct of the energy system of burning sugar. Okay, so if you push that lactate threshold up, what ends up happening is it causes fatigue buffering, which means you don't get tired. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in great conditioning, it's like a superpower. Like you can be a little lazy to some degree. You can be, you can actually think. If you've ever taken off a little bit of time when you're doing combat sports, a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, when you come back, it's torturous. And it's not because of lack of skill. It's just lack of fatigue. Your lactate threshold is very, very low. And that's one of the biggest things that you need to work on when you're training, is figuring out how to increase that lactate threshold so you don't get fatigued when you're actually doing your combat sport. Okay? Now, over here on this side, what I put with zone 2 is for faster recovery between efforts. Okay, so your heart works in 2 different ways. Okay, there's high-end training, like the HIIT training that you're doing, where what's happening is you're squeezing the heart to its maximal capabilities. Zone 2 training is lower intensity, lower BPM, and what that does is it expands the elasticity to the aorta, which is the main ventricle of the heart. So think of it this way. If it has like a water hose, if I'm able to expand the water hose larger and larger and larger and larger because it's the constant state of blood flow going through that aorta. What ends up happening is when the heart squeezes, it's able to pump more blood per stroke, which allows you to recover faster because you're going to reduce the amount of effort, so your heart doesn't have to push as hard. But what ends up happening is able to push more blood per stroke, which allows you to get more nutrients, which allows you to get more oxygen, which allows you to get all that, the gunk that you get from the byproduct of burning the sugar in the glycotic state, which is why the lactate threshold, as you push it up, because it buffers fatigue. Okay, so in the long run, you have to add zone 2 training. What I found is a lot of MMA fighters, especially jiu-jitsu guys, is they don't do any of this. This is like year over year effort. So don't think of it as like you're going to get immediate benefits from this. You're going to get immediate benefits from training with glycotic work. But in the long run, building that fatigue buffering, you're going to need the zone 2 training. You need it. It helps with recovery between maximal effort. Okay? And then the next thing, or the last thing that I basically put on here, well, it's not the last thing because the last thing is recovery. My bad. You want to match the way you train with your sport. So the examples I put here is that if you're a striker, let's say you're in the gym and you're doing pad work. You're going to do pad work plus movement under fatigue. So I would say, let's say you're doing pad work, you're doing drilling, and in between rounds, you're doing push-ups. Okay? That's not really going to happen in real life, but you're pushing the work effort combined with your actual activity, so that when you do end up getting that rest period and you exclude the push-ups, you're able to recover faster between rounds. Okay, with grapplers, it's all about grip. So you want to do grip work, which is the actual grappling, and then do isometrics, which would be stuff like dead hangs or like pull-ups. So if you have the capabilities, I know my jiu-jitsu coach has a pull-up bar in his jiu-jitsu gym, and he basically does like one-arm hangs all day, left arm, right arm, both arms. He'll do like muscle ups, and he's working that all throughout the day because he's complementing what he needs in the gripping world so that he gets stronger here so that he's stronger here. That's the same idea here. You get stronger here so that you get stronger on the pad work. And then in MMA, it's slightly different. You're going to mix modalities. So you're going to do movement under fatigue. You're going to do isometrics, which is dead hangs. And then you're actually going to do all the work. So you got to kind of think in that pattern. You got to complement what you're doing in your sport with the physical activity or something under stress, whatever that facet or whatever it is that you need to kind of work on. Wrestlers work a lot with neck. Totally different game. You just have to figure that out for whatever your sport is. And then the very last thing is recovery. So a lot of people forget to do this. So at least once a week, I would say even 2 to 3 times a week, you want to do breath work. What that does is it teaches diaphragmatic breathing. And if your lung capacity is able to breathe in, or you can actually increase the amount of oxygen that you breathe in through your lungs. And you got to work out those muscles just like anything else. So you can't just do it under load. You have to do it to help the recovery of the load that you're doing. So think of it this way. So what I tell a lot of my like general fitness clients is if we're doing, let's say we did legs and they're like, oh my God, my legs are sore. I can barely walk. I tell them, listen, mild cardio or walking or doing a little bit of the bike or doing a little bit of the Stairmaster is actually going to heal that process. Because again, a little bit of stress in the same area causes additional stress, which causes a rotation of blood flow within that muscle tissue, which causes it to heal faster. It's the same concept with breathing. So there's muscles that are helping you breathe, your diaphragm, your lung capacity, inside your lungs, there's muscles. Inside the muscular tissue around your rib cage, there's muscles. All those muscles are being worked when you're doing your actual sport. So in order to help them recover, because you're going to be tired from your sport, you need to do breath work. It's going to help all that musculature get stronger so that when you come back, you're able to put more effort here because you help that musculature recover through breath work. And then cold exposure, that's just helping your body recover. Everybody knows that. If you can do this 1 or 2, I'm horrible at this, but If you could get like 1 time a week, 2 times a week, I think the study is up to like 3 times a week is most efficient. Something like that, I'm not really sure. But you can look at that up. There's a bunch of podcasts. Everybody talks about how cold exposure there is. So adding that in is just an additional layer of helping your body heal. All right, guys, I think that's everything. Thanks for watching. And same thing as always, put a comment. If you have any questions, shoot me a DM. I try to answer as soon as I possibly can. See you on the next one.